So, good afternoon. It's Thursday, January 5th, 2023. I got to get used to saying that. This is a school board workshop, and the time is 12 p.m. Board members Giovanelli and Patrica will be joining us virtually at whenever we can get them online here. Today on the agenda, we have the proximity plan draft, the agenda review of the January 10th regular agenda, and the good of order. We will begin with the proximity draft plan. And Dr. Renier, would you like to introduce your presenters?
Mr. Chair, Happy New Year to you as well. Had to write the date for the first time in the last several days. It'll take a while to get the 22 off the end of the final slash, but certainly welcome back to everybody. January to June in our school district is always a very busy time. It's historically busy because we're talking about the enrollment of students in a very expansive choice district. This is a very timely workshop to be having. I would like to take the opportunity to introduce our Chief of Staff, Michael Ramirez, and the Coordinator for the Superintendent's Office, Dr. Adam Malloy. Both gentlemen have been hard at work for the better part of my tenure, really refining a proximity plan which started, we had a conversation yesterday in Cabinet, the discussions concerning proximity changes in our structures are almost a decade old. The difference is we know we have come up, and you have both as returning board members and new board members, you've experienced our transportation situation firsthand through constituent phone calls, emails, and on your campaigns. We have got to do something about the 23-24 school year in order to ensure that our students and our families are receiving the level of service and expectation that they so richly deserve. So part of that solution is to ensure that children can be in place on time when a school day begins. Otherwise, we lose vital instructional hours, and I say hours because minutes add up, and they add up very quickly. It also provides our teachers a very consistent start time where their first period class can actually begin first period at the secondary level, or in the case of an elementary school, that the gathering of first grade classroom can begin and instruction can begin, and we can utilize all of our instructional minutes. So these two gentlemen are prepared to provide you an overview of what the previous discussions prior to this administration have unveiled and provided information, as well as our most recent work prior to the hurricane and then post-hurricane, so that we can talk a little bit about a need to move forward and a decision that's going to have to be rendered very quickly in order to make sure that we are in a position to go through the spring registration process and be ready for students in the fall. So I'll say this when you come back to me, and that is simply be thinking about any question you may have. Proximity, transportation, student enrollments, zones, transfers, grandfathering, sibling preference. There's all sorts of terms that you have in your head. There is no question right now that wouldn't better help inform these two gentlemen, myself, and the staff that we're utilizing to plan for this potential transition to support student achievement and student learning. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Ramirez and Dr. Malloy.
Thank you, Dr. Bernier, and good afternoon, board. Happy New Year. This afternoon, as Dr. Bernier mentioned, want to provide you some of the thinking and some of the work around proximity, but also take a step back and also be able to share with you some of the work, the previous work that has happened around this topic. And Dr. Malloy is joining me today, who's done extensive work over a number of years around proximity. So this afternoon, as we think about the agenda for this afternoon, we want to talk about, we'll go through the project focus, what the focus of the project has been as we're looking at proximity, excuse me, current challenges that exist in the district related to our student enrollment and proximity, and how we work through that, as well as a draft proximity plan around some of the thinking that around that, and it will include maps as well as procedures. There'll be a reference to some maps in previous iteration of this plan. There were multiple maps, and you'll see one particular map identified, as well as an implementation of what this may look like over the course of 3 years. So you'll be able to see what year one, the implementation will look like, and then the subsequent years, how we're thinking about that, as well as critical tasks that are going to be really, really important. As Dr. Bernier mentioned, the timing is right as we're about to embark into the enrollment process and the open enrollment process. This conversation today, as well as the conversations this month, will inform what these next few months will look like in our school district. So when we talk about the project focus itself, we have grounded that focus around creating a better student assignment system for our community across. And when we think about what that looks like, we've identified and know that we want to have a system that sets up our students for success and our schools for success, and addressing transportation of inefficiencies that have existed for a number of years that continue to get worse, that worsen as we look at some of the shortages and some of the things that we've experienced. We're also, a project focuses around improving that connection between communities and their schools, and really what does that look like and what could that look like, and as well as a continuous improvement around student distribution across the district. So we've been grounding ourselves in that project focus around, but really starting with a better student assignment system for our entire community as we think through what that could look like. Current challenges, Dr. Bernier mentioned, when we talk about getting students to school and home on time, we know currently over 2,000 students each day are late to school, and we know the subsequent, because of our tiering, the times that our students, that final tier of students get home at night is really late as well. So there are significant challenges there around that ability for that on time to school and home. Access to community schools, challenges around what that could look like as we think about programs and opportunities within those schools. Participation in our current system, when you look at ours, and associated outcomes with that as we think about the number of our families and that actually participate and what that looks like, and those that wait and what that impact has to the selection of choices they'll have in schools as well is really critical. The scale of transportation, we transport, the scale, the number was 156 square miles, across the entire, county. And when you look at the map that is identified, that school identified there, which I believe is James Stevens, is the school. Yeah, Allen Park, Allen Park. That arrow identifies Allen Park, and those black dots on that map identify where the students reside that actually attend Allen Park. So you can see across the entire county as far as where we're transporting students all to get to Allen Park Elementary School. So I just want to give you kind of a visual there so that obviously the uneven distribution of students across and what that impact is, and really look at that. So the plan that we'll talk about as a draft and engage in conversation is an attempt to really look at mitigating a number of these things as we talk about what this could look like. And on the proximity draft map plans, you'll see this map, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Malloy, who will share just some of the historical context of the work that has happened around that, as well as the several iterations of maps that have that previous administrations as well as community have seen, and where we landed in a map that we'll present this afternoon as well. So Dr. Malloy.
Thank you, Mr. Ramirez, and Happy New Year, Board. Great resolution for our school district is to embark upon a system change related to student assignment. In terms of the maps, our technical work was really focused on reducing the size of our attendance zones using GIS study areas. So if you want to think of GIS study areas, are really small communities that are populated by students and families, and then we're able to layer data with those GIS study areas. We then group a lot of study areas together to make an attendance zone. So that work was done, and we produced a number of maps which we went out to the community in 2021. And we received feedback as it related to those maps and those boundaries. We did a lot of the technical work, changing boundaries and streets, connecting communities with schools based on the feedback. We operated not just a website, but also an email address, and we did a lot of hard work as it related to the maps. We did come to the board with what was called at the time Proximity Map 4, which with slight adjustments for capacity, we are now calling Proximity Map 1. So if you want to think about maps, we're really just focused on reducing the size of the attendance zones, and then the consequences of that, or implications, the reduction of bus routes, and then the scale of transportation. One term that I did want to bring up that I think is really important is transportation responsibility. The responsibility of the school district to provide transportation. And one aspect that the maps deal with is really the reduction of those routes, the size of the subzones, and then our responsibility as a district to transport. Right. These maps were produced in collaboration with Davis Demographics, a technical working group that's been working for the past 3 years, really in earnest of trying to reduce the size and then also ease the responsibility of transportation for the school district. Formerly Map 4, this is Proximity Map 1, and really this is a recommended map based on the feedback not just from the community, but really from our internal teams that are taking a look at a community that really values choice, okay? Reducing that choice while still honoring it, and then seeing the improvements in transportation efficiencies. Proximity Map 1 reduces the number of elementary school choices from 12 to 4. Okay. It also reduces the scale of transportation, which is just another way of saying our responsibility as a district to transport by over 100 square miles on average. This is a large-scale system change as it relates to elementary schools, but this map, you probably recognize it. There were some adjustments that were made based on schools coming online, not coming online, and then adjusted capacity based on enrollment this previous year and projected for the next year. In terms of procedures, this is the second part of proximity. Our project work really focused on 2 areas, grandfathering and transportation. So grandfathering is the ability of a student to remain at a current school if they are now residing outside of that zone, right? Transportation is whether or not we will provide transportation. These recommendations that we're going to go over really developed using community feedback in district operational considerations. As it relates to grandfathering, our proposal and approach is really that the proximity plan map and associated school choices will go into effect for incoming kindergarten students and elementary students new to the district. So if you're thinking about who this will immediately impact, right, those new choices will be for incoming kindergartners and then elementary students new to the district. All rising elementary students are provided the option to continue to attend their current school. However, transportation will not be provided unless the current school is within the new proximity boundaries. So in essence, our proposal in draft is to activate 14 small attendance zones for elementary school that honor the choice, honor the current system, right, but only transport within. In addition to rising kindergartners and then also students new to the district, any rising elementary student that needs transportation that lives outside of the attendance zone will participate in the proximity lottery using the proximity plan map and school choices. So this is, again, incoming kindergartners, students new to the district, and then if you are living outside and need transportation, you will go into the proximity lottery, right? As it relates to transportation, transportation will strictly be provided to elementary students attending a school within the new proximity plan map. Grandfathered elementary students attending a school outside of the new proximity map will not be provided transportation. This gets us out of the running dual systems for our transportation. It immediately impacts transportation efficiency because we are activating smaller routes in smaller zones. In terms of implementation for year 1, 2, and 3, you'll notice a lot of similarities in terms of impact and adding a grade on each year. so that you can see that the impacted student population will be complete with proximity after 4 or 5 years. Students new to the district and then rising students in living in a new attendance zone and requesting transportation will go into the proximity lottery. I did want to draw your attention to year 2 and 3. You'll see that middle school choices as a goal will be aligned to the proximity maps, and then potentially the impact on moving transportation to a 3-tier system. Adjusting high school and middle school start and end times is a definite advantage, I think, to addressing some of the issues that proximity is looking to solve. Not just having our start and end times based on busing, right, but actually on research and families and parents, I think is something that we could see in year 2 and in year 3. In terms of critical tasks, the finalization and presentation of the plan for student enrollment, which we have January 20th and January 24th. I did want to mention that within the plan for student enrollment, which has been edited to match proximity for elementary schools, we will continue to offer sibling preference. We will continue to offer ESE and transportation to the ESE accommodations and programs that are needed by each student and family. In terms of the impact on K-8s, which we do have 3 K-8s, it will only impact the K-5 part of the K-8s. Okay. Our community engagement and communication plan will continue. Really from the end of 2020, we have done a lot of work as it relates to engaging the community in terms of proximity and what this means. But now that we have both our maps and we have the procedures attached, now we can communicate, well, what does this mean? You are now living in this new attendance zone. These are your options. If you would like to remain, you can and be provided transportation if you live within. If you would like to remain at your current school and live outside of the zone, you will have to waive transportation and provide your own. We thought that that was something that we heard over and over again from parents. Hey, listen, this is something that I fought really hard for in the current system. Can you honor that? And I think that this is a procedure and approach that does honor a parent's choice in the current system. It just reduces our responsibility to transport. In terms of board presentations, you will be seeing Mr. Ramirez, Ms. Ralph, and myself a decent amount in January, just given the timeline of open enrollment. We are delaying open enrollment to after middle and high school, which starts on the 17th. So until we have everything moving forward based on your feedback, elementary school open enrollment will be delayed until we're set. The public-facing map and documents will be available, we're hoping by end of day tomorrow. We never actually deactivated the proximity plan website. We just took off what was not, what wasn't relevant for the community. We will then add what is relevant as it relates to the map, the public-facing app where they can plug in their address and see their zones, and then also all associated documents, presentations, and videos up until that point. And I think that that's where, we've gone out recently, and really parents and community, they just want to know, well, what does this mean for me? Where do I live? What are my choices? When is this going to happen? What are my dates for the windows? And then in terms of accountability and continuous improvement, this is a system change that will require a large amount of monitoring year after year, quarter after quarter, as to what it's doing, how it's improving certain systems, what is the cost savings. So that is a really big goal for our team, is that we're not just designing something and then letting it run. Right? This is something that we have to stay on top of because we know that it's setting the table for our schools. And we're hopeful that with our conversation and as a team, we can move both the map and the procedures forward for this upcoming school year for elementary schools.
So prior to turning over to Dr. Bernier, just a couple of things that I would also highlight as we talk about, and you've heard the focus on elementary. With our K-8s, we will be looking at the K-5 impact. Around K-5, it wouldn't impact the 6-8, but obviously the K-5, as well as the rules that we determined on sibling preference would be in play, similar to the way they are now. So that's one thing I want to elevate. As well as statute is clear around school choice and a parent's ability to attend a school if there's a seat in a school, that doesn't change. There's still the ability of a parent to drive their student to any school that has an open seat. This is specific to our enrollment plan and as we look at our process here, but that also is a piece of what does not change as far as the ability for parents to, if there's an open seat in any school, whether it be in Lee County, Charlotte County, that a parent wishes to attend, parent still has the right to be able to do that. Thus, they could, as long as they can provide their own transportation to get there. So that's we just want to align it to what state statute is around just what the is allowable by law, state law, and then obviously how it relates to this plan and what the work is here. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Dr. Bernier.
Thank you, gentlemen. I really appreciate the opportunity to be as transparent and as detail-oriented as this presentation could be. Clearly, this will all be a means of where the rubber meets the road and how people are impacted. I do think it's important before beginning the discussion with the board just to reiterate that idea that there are certain subpopulations that will not be impacted. I think our ESE parents worry greatly about programming and will their child have to change a school. That's been very clear in this presentation that that is not being impacted. Those routes and those abilities for those parents to have the services and their accommodations regarding their IEP will stay in place. I also want to make sure that you're clear that these are our recommendations at this time. It sounds like we may have made a decision. We have done that purposefully. We wanted to bring forth what we thought at this point is our best thinking. Our best thinking is not a decision, but it's been presented in a manner and means by which it would be clear to all of you that these are really tight discussion points. We've tried to eliminate some of the other ancillary discussions that can bog us down in a lot of other issues, focusing on that. And lastly, I think before we get into your discussion, as we look toward, well, two things. As we look to your years 2 and 3 on slide 11, those boxes for years 2 and 3 are sort of to be determined. They're our best thinking and planning. What I would suggest as we move into 23, 24 with whatever this board decides, we are really deciding proximity 1.0. If you think about how computer software develops from 1.0 to 1.5 to 1.7, well, this is really has to be an ongoing annual process as we continue to look to expand. And finally, I didn't hear it mentioned, I may have missed it. I want you to be clear that there has been a principal focus group involved in this planning process. They've been working with both Mr. Ramirez and Dr. Malloy, helping to provide their perspective from the elementary and K-8 perspective as to how this type of plan would impact their particular facilities as well as the elementary group, both in a standalone elementary and in a K-8. At this point, Mr. Chair, I will turn it over for you and the board members' discussion with, again, my recommendation that everything should be on the table here today. It's why we've tried to schedule this as almost a singular item on our agenda, because we wanted to spend the quality time we need in order to be able to bring a recommendation maybe as late as January, maybe as early as January, but as late as early February of this 2023 year.
Thank you all for the presentation. For questions, Mr. Fisher, do you have any?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. Mr. Ramirez, Dr. Malloy, thank you so much for this. I know you've put a lot of hard work, especially Dr. Malloy. I know you've been dealing with this for years, so I appreciate that. I'm a fan of the proximity plan, and especially for me, getting more towards a neighborhood school concept. That is something that's very important to me, and I believe the constituents in my community. Do have some questions for you now. In regards to the maps, we talked about a general choice of 4, and I know Dr. Bernier had just mentioned that this is an ongoing process, 1.1, 1.2. Is there any consideration going forward as we progress, perhaps going down to 2 or 3 options within those, especially depending on where schools are built?
Yeah, certainly, part of this process would be an improvement in potentially even another phase of reduction, still keeping with the state statute of choice. We just thought with the system and how choice was so embedded for the past 17 years, that going that drastic to a 1-to-1, which we had prepared those maps, we had done that work in that exercise. It just created a large amount of displacement, as you might imagine, going from least to most. But certainly, if that's the will of the board in the direction of our team, we can move down that line to get even smaller and get even tighter with our attendance zones.
Okay, okay. And I know this is something, and I appreciate the presentations you've done in the community as well, and what you keep mentioning about, obviously, state statute, that people will still have choices, more of a transportation issue. So I want to make sure, as you guys keep repeating it, that is still out there. Transfers. So let's say somebody has a child that in elementary that is out of their zone, if this is approved. How does it work if they want to transfer into a school within their zone that would provide transportation? Let's say they're in second grade.
So that's a fantastic question. So basically what we would be setting up would be 2 concurrent windows. And this would only run as long as we still had students that would like to be grandfathered or entered into the system. After a certain number of years, they would just go into the new proximity system with those smaller number of choices. So in terms of what we need to do as it relates to operational considerations and capacity, we would need to run a grandfathering window first. You currently live outside of your current school zone. Would you like to remain? Those parents would have to select to remain and waive transportation. We would then adjust capacity within the proximity zone, and then we would run a new proximity lottery. In that new proximity lottery, as you just suggested, anybody wanting to get closer to home, right, they would participate in that new proximity lottery. So not just incoming kindergartners and students new to the district, but also ones that would like to enter to go closer to home.
From your feel from just community events, I know this is a very general question, but do you feel like there would be a lot of parents that would keep their kids at their same schools that are outside of their zone possibly? I know that's a broad question.
In general, a lot of the feedback that we heard from 21-22 was that the community would like us to honor their choice and that they were okay with transporting their child. Now that was set up kind of for that group because the ones that were very interested in coming out and seeing the maps were interested as to the question of, well, what does this mean for our family? So the community feedback that we heard was, please honor our current choice in the current system. All right, and so our discussion and our really approach to be agreeable with that was yes, however, you'll have to waive transportation if you're not within the new smaller zone.
Okay. I know you guys had talked about K through 8, but what about the academies? How does this factor in, or any changes in regards to those?
The initial impact, before I turn it to them, the initial impact in the academies would be to their elementary populations. So I think that's the most important factor. Again, same options, same choices. But as we get into a 1.0, a 1.5, or a 2.0, as we start to look at the middle school, we could potentially look at how the academies are impacted by this small shift of kindergartners in the first phase, and then we could make some accommodations specifically to a magnet school that serves a specific type of student who is searching a particular type of education within one of those K-8s. So that again is why we have years 2 and 3. We wanted to not only suggest to you as the board that this is not the final decision as it comes to proximity, but this will be an ongoing process of refinement as we move forward. Dr. Malloy, anything to add?
No, you said it very straight to the point. I would like to reiterate that while elementary schools have been programmed, right? They're not actually, magnet schools. Our K-5s are essentially all the same in terms of access, but their programs are perhaps a little bit different. So to Dr. Bernier's point, that's something that we could address in year 2, in year 3. But as it relates to the academies and programs, those would remain. The impact would just be initially those incoming kindergartner students new to the district, and then anybody needing transportation within that small zone.
Okay. Now getting down to busing and routes. With some of the models, and I know you guys have run models, and again, there's a lot of variables that go into this. In reduction to route times, do we have any idea, for example, what are, again, traffic time and that, but what are, if these routes are run in these new zones, what would be some of the longest times compared to now? I know we have kids that are up to sometimes an hour and a half now. Do we have any idea what kind of the max ones would be now?
So when we discussed the reduction of route times, the first thing Mr. Lloyd suggested is what it would open up in terms of those drivers as it related to the tiers and collapsing routes for those drivers. We don't have an exact distance that would be reduced in terms of average, but what we do have is the potential for those routes to be collapsed and then joined together so that those tiers could then be moved. And I think that Mr. Lloyd was very confident in year 2 that we could move from a tier 4 or a 4-tier system to a 3-tier system. He thought that it was extremely feasible with the reduction of the route size in each one of the smaller zones that 3 tiers could be accomplished. And that would be a huge transportation efficiency feat for the district that would allow us a lot more flexibility as it related to start and end times and availability of bus drivers throughout the day.
Mr. Chair, can I help?
Yes.
Can I help quantify? Mr. Fisher, it's a great question. Until we know exactly where our families are going to locate and how they're going to do this, it would be hard to come up with an express set of time of what the average run at an elementary school would be. But let me clarify a couple of things for the public that I think are really important. When Dr. Malloy speaks about a 4-tier system, what he's discussing is that a first tier is our high school run. Then we have 2 tiers of elementary. So then we run once we've run all our high school kids to school, then we begin the process of taking the first layer of elementaries, followed by a second layer of elementary for tier number 3, and finally a tier 4. This type of consolidation of routes does one very important thing. It gets more students to school on time. On a daily average, we're averaging more than 2,000 students late to school every day. And we're about that same number, if not slightly larger, when we get to the number of students getting home from the middle school runs well after their day has been dismissed at their middle school. So that's the first thing that process accomplishes. What it will also do, and I'm going to use the word will, what it will also do is shorten those elementary runs because the buses won't have to go as far and as wide in the amount of breadth that they're currently covering. I think looking at Allen Park and looking at that black dot of a student way out on the east side of our zones, that's a transportation run, right? By consolidating this, we will be able to shorten up the runs, which in turn, in a year 2 or year 3, allow us to think about not just a 4-tier system, but bringing it into a 3-tier system. A high school set of runs, an elementary set of runs, because now we have enough drivers to do the elementaries on 1 tier, then the middle school runs, which frees up time to then think about as a board, what do we think about our high school start times? Are they too early? What do we think about our middle school end times? Are they too late? And allows us to maybe compress a little later starting time so our high school kids get some sleep, but a little shorter time before our middle school students are addressed without impacting the instructional day. The students will get the same amount of instructional minutes. So I'm not sure that's a time on when bus trip number 2822 leaves the yard, what time it will be back. We don't have that specificity yet, but it will be a metric that we'll cover and make sure that we're measuring.
Okay. One last question, and it kind of piggybacks off of that, and I don't know if this is maybe, again, a Dr. Bernier question for this. One of my things I'm looking at in this component is, will this have a significant impact? Again, I would guess year 2 to figure that out. With our bus drivers shortage needing as many, we'll be able to compact those routes. Will that have a significant impact, we think?
And speaking with Mr. Lord, that is one thing where this shift would significantly help that issue of the shortage of drivers because of the need of routes based on that, and obviously the ability to back drivers because now their routes will not be as long. When you look at the map that we showed with Allen Park and that distance, that will be a more of a 5-mile radius, which would allow drivers to kind of come back to be able, so it will certainly help that. And in Mr. Lloyd's, his words here, any improvements and movement this way is going to help us, is going to help transportation significantly.
Okay.
The other piece that I want to just insert really quickly in case, because I'm sure there are some bus drivers, clearly principals listening, there will be enough opportunity for our current employment force to be employed as a school bus driver. This process will not reduce the number of drivers needed. It will better align the number of opportunities we have to drive a bus with the number of bus drivers we have. But we will not see any type of reduction in force amongst our bus drivers. I just want to qualify that other side to it because rumors can start very quickly. We'll have more than enough routes to go to our drivers that we currently have, and we will be more operationally efficient at the same time.
Okay, thank you on that. Yeah, I mean, that's one of my chief concerns, and you know, many people in the district is our current model is not sustainable. So, and we need a big change with this, and I appreciate that. I mean, you know, just from how long kids are on buses and all those kind of things in regards to, you know, their academic day. So, I want to thank you both for your work on this, and thank you for answering my questions.
Sam, Board Member Fisher, I'm never letting you go first again. That was almost all the questions I had, and probably the rest of us. I'm actually going to go to Mrs. Giovanelli, if she's available. Is she with us?
I am. Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, I'll shake.
Oh, thank you. Okay, yeah, I can't see you, so, my main concern would be, and thank you for those questions, Mr. Fisher, you did ask a lot. In fact, one of your questions, which is one of my main concerns, is the academies. I do think that we need to make sure that opportunity is still available for, all students. And I know there's like auditions, and there could be a magnet program. So, because years ago we had the magnet program, and where opportunities were for anyone in the district that wanted to attend that particular school. They had, there was a lottery and so forth. And I just don't want to overlook any of the academies, because we have 3 really important ones, and they're in different zones, and I just think that the opportunity still needs to be there for that, because the arts is a huge piece that's really important for our education system and the opportunities for students, because not all of our schools offer the arts at the depth of like the North Myers Academy of the Arts, and so I just really want to make sure that is really thought through. I really appreciate the work that's been done on the proximity plan. I do support the proximity plan. I just want to make sure that all pieces are covered regarding, this, especially the arts piece of it, and making sure that opportunity is available for all students in each zone. And even if the parents choose to drive their students there, I think that's even happening already in some of the academies. So I just want to make sure that we really don't close that window of opportunity for students. Other than that, for me, I think that the information is really good. I don't think we should narrow it any more than the 4. Personally, I think it's tight enough as it is. So, thank you.
Ms. Jordan.
Thank you for this, and I know I've looked at this 1,000 times, but every time I look at it, I have more questions. So when I'm looking at, and thank you, Mr. Fisher, for all your questions, they were good. But when I'm looking at D, that you're still, when you were speaking about transportation, James Stevens to Alva. When I'm looking at that, that's quite a drive from East Fort Myers to way out East Fort Myers. So that was one, and I know there's 6 in D itself. But then when I'm looking at the schools that are listed in D, that is concerning to me because of the great needs of the schools that are in there. And I'm saying that because half of that is my district. So I know what the needs are there. So I'm definitely, and I know that every school is great, but that is a concern. I love Bayshore is not crossing a river. You know, it's not we took that line away as far as the zone. So we put them, or maybe it's there, I just don't see it. But when we were talking about North Fort Myers Academy, they would follow and continue on if they were there. Does that hold true to the other students that are there? If they were coming from Bayshore, would they not have to cross over the river in middle school?
Dr. Malloy or Mr. Ramirez, you're more familiar with the map. The way I'm interpreting it, I wanted to make sure is the way you're interpreting it. And since you are the resident experts on where those lines are being drawn, to Ms. Jordan's question, I'm going to ask you to respond.
So one thing, Ms. Jordan, to your first point about Bayshore, that was something that we heard from the Bayshore community for a large number of years, was how they preferred not to be in this large geographic kind of subzone zone. They would like to be a little bit more confined as it related to their community. And that was certainly something that we addressed by moving some of the lines so that Bayshore could accommodate a larger population, but also closer to Bayshore. Now, as it relates to North Academy, again, all rising students, whether they live throughout any part of the Cape that attend North Fort Myers Academy, can continue to attend. Just our responsibility for transportation. And certainly what we heard from Ms. Giovanelli is that there may be a desire perhaps to address some of those K-8 academies or some of those special programs, which is something our team can look at. But right now, as it relates to C, that would be activated for transportation. So really any of those students that are living in C that would need transportation, they would want to attend one of those schools within C. I did want to remind you, Ms. Jordan, though, on D, that our preference system will continue to operate in the proximity plan. So you will still be awarded a P1 if you live within 2 miles of a school. So that densely populated area of D will fill up, as it already does in our current system, with a large amount of neighborhood or community students. And now D is very large,
right.
As you saw. It does stretch very far east. I imagine that if implemented in its current state, it will operate almost like 2 smaller proximity zones, given the preferences that will carry over. And you know, I noticed that that large concentration on the west side of D, a large number of those kids already are using their P1 preference, and that will continue in the proximity plan.
Okay, so then going to year 2, so if they're in Bayshore, I think you know where I'm going with this. So does that mean they can stay across, do not have to cross that bridge and get the water again?
They will elect to, yes, they would elect to stay in that first window. They would waive transportation, and then they would transport themselves to Bayshore. If they would like to have transportation, then they could go into the new proximity map.
Okay, I'm sorry, maybe I misspoke. So if they're in Bayshore right now for elementary, so the next year we're looking at middle school. So does that area C continue to stay where they are not being shipped over, because we're talking about busing, they would then have first dibs on North Fort Myers Academy?
Yeah, I see.
understand
Now
what
I
I'm
see
saying?
exactly where you're going. If we aligned the maps, yes, that certainly would be a consideration, would be to group them that way. That technical work has not been done at the level and the depth yet. But that is certainly a consideration for year 2, that if we were to align the maps, that is certainly something that the team would look at.
Okay, and then, let's see what else. And then I know with the academy, so the academies we have one academy, which is North Fort Myers Academy. And I believe that Ms. Giovanelli was probably speaking about Edison Park perhaps as an elementary school with the art programs. What is the other?
We have Veterans Park Academy for the Arts.
Oh, in Lehigh, I'm sorry, yes. They're
Academy for the Arts, yeah, there's one in each one in each of our
K-8.
zones.
Okay, I'm sorry. I misspoke. And what else? So my other question is, so now you can come, you can stay at your school, And if you are currently at, say, Edison Park, and you do not live in the zone, you can stay there, you can choose to stay there, but now you have to waive that right. What about our parents who, and I have to go there with this because all of our children do not have the same ability, their families do not have the same ability to transport their kids. Are they able to drop them off before school to leave them there, so that they can go to work? Do they have a daycare afterwards that they could actually come back and pick up their kids to give them the same opportunity where I, as a parent, I don't have an hour and a half to sit in a line to wait for my child every day or drop them off. So I think that, and I know I'm being the devil's advocate, but I know that all of our parents do not have those opportunities in our families. So are we leaving them out in what we're doing? And I understand that we have to do something, but I also have to, think about, your single family homes, whatever that looks like, are we doing right by them as well?
Mr. Chair, Board Member Jordan, every time we've done this presentation at a cabinet meeting, the idea of individuals that you're speaking about rises to the surface. We continue to go around it and talk about it. The two gentlemen here and the staff that they represent have been charged with looking at other large districts who've implemented this. There are several who have removed transportation from their systems and have found in our conversations with them, though we don't have the data yet, which is why you're going to be seeing them more, have found that there are manners and means by which parents have been able to still exercise their choice options. Are they able to exercise their choice option every time to the specific school they want to go to? The answer to that is no choice system will ever provide that. Right now, we deny children access to particular schools because we just run out of capacity. So that's with transportation being provided. We have got to do something that takes us from a 42,000 seat system up to the 100,000 seat system that we are going to be again, and to the 150,000 seat system that we will eventually be in the future. This is a difficult decision moving forward, but we are providing the opportunity within each one of the zones for choice that will be transported, which gets us within the proximity of the laws that we are expected to follow within the state. We can certainly look at other options, but we want to investigate with other large districts who have made this choice and this decision and bring that back to you at the briefing.
Thank you. And again, I do understand this, so I'm just saying when we do something like this, are we going to make it where they are able to drop their child off so that they can continue to go to work? Are we going to be looking at that, the after care and before care as part of this whole thing to make sure that they're not just the forgotten children or the forgotten families, because we have to do this?
In my one-on-ones with many of you, and if I haven't, I think I've done it with all of you, but I know we've had a transition of board members, so I apologize to the newest board members if they've not had this visionary discussion with me. I have been in conversation since I arrived with various community partners and the collaboratory. Our work was a little derailed in September and into October, but we are working right now, and they have been doing their own particular homework, those community providers, looking at a large urban system that has provided both before and after school care at all elementaries and all middles. And we will continue to do that work. My vision is for every parent to have an affordable system both before and after school at the elementary and a system at the middle school, because once we get into high school, there's additional age as well as lots of other activities for students to belong to. Can I promise that for a 23-24 school system? I don't think I can, but it will be a priority for us with our elementaries, and many of our elementaries do offer both before and after school care. The question is whether it would be affordable. So we can examine that as well.
Okay, and then when you're speaking, I'm also thinking, and this is my last thing for this moment, but if a parent or family chose a daycare provider or some type of aftercare, before care provider outside of our system, then that would be another option for them to keep their child out of school as well, because they would be transporting their kid. That's just, I'm just putting that out there.
It
Just in
is, and
case.
it's a viable option for some parents. It's not a viable option for all. But having, and I think all the principals in this room and anybody who sat in the principalship will all remember the daycare van that pulled up in our parent pickup loop to collect young people who were leaving the campus and headed to another location so that they could be supervised until their parent was freed up from their workday. My goal is not to eliminate those options. My goal is for those options to work in concert with us, because with 100,000 children, we certainly have enough to go around to populate every daycare provider and after-school provider that we have. But wouldn't it also be great if those kids never had to leave their building and that they could be supervised until 6 p.m.?
Thank you, I agree with you there. Thank you, thank you.
Mrs. Langford Fleming.
Sorry. Thank you. Obviously, there's been a lot of time and effort put in behind this, so thank you to you and your team. Really, all the questions that I had were already answered. So Sam, or Mr. Fisher, you can always go first if that's the way it goes. But the only one thing that hadn't been brought up is regarding our, and just if you wouldn't mind updating me on this, but is regarding our actual educators and staff and their own children who don't go to school at their school. So for example, an elementary school teacher who has a student who goes to middle school or high school, how will that play into this new proximity plan for our staff?
Yeah, so the employee waiver will continue, and I believe last year the percentage of employee waivers that were processed and, you know, to the satisfaction of the employee was close to 100%. So that will continue in the new plan as well.
Thank you.
So? Ms. Morton.
So I want to thank the administration for finally landing a plane that has been circling for 3.5 to 4 years. I want to thank you for making a bold recommendation for us to consider and highlighting the critical questions that we need to answer, because I think that's how we move forward. And also the timeline, making us very, very aware of our decision timeline. So after everything that's come before me, I only have one question and a couple of things I want to emphasize. How will we identify the students who are outside the zone? How will we communicate with them so that they know that they are losing their transportation option? To me, that's the biggest hurdle we face. But
I'm going to let Michael and Adam fill you in, but from Christopher, from Dr. Bernier, the answer to that is a complicated process. And while we talk about all this process working, there are some very important things that need to be occurring previously at school sites, but now in earnest, in order to be able to communicate specifically with the most impacted grade levels. I won't go into too much of the detail, or to say that the incoming kindergarten process is already underway. So they've done some good work there, and there's been some good systems put in place to keep every kindergarten parent from having to come down here to get registered for school. But the next two critical grade levels will be that 5th rising to 6th and that 8th rising to 9th. But I'll let Dr. Malloy add anything to that he feels is relevant, or Mr. Ramirez.
The other thing I would add, not particularly sharing details, but that is something, I mean, as late as leaving this, you're coming to this meeting, we were talking about the communication plan moving forward. And as Dr. Bernier mentioned, you will see us, hopefully you'd like to see us a couple more times this month to further dive into the plan and the communication piece. And we recognize that's the second layer, once we have the clear direction on that, because we recognize that there are populations in our district where sometimes they're hard to, we just don't reach for whatever means of communication, and that is something that the team collectively, we're tackling that, and we recognize, you know, all means all, and really making sure that and we've talked about a lot of different possibilities. So what you could expect is, in the coming meetings, additional information on what does that plan look like, with more details to ensure that we have all those efforts to reach all of our parents and that they're informed.
To Mr. Ramirez's point, really using data and being strategic to get at the heart of the disconnect. So we're able to look at every school, and already we see the numbers of those that live outside the zone. So we can be very strategic about how we set up our engagement opportunities. In meeting with community engagement and communications yesterday, saying, hey, listen, these are the schools that we could potentially need, if this moves forward, our extra support. So being very strategic with those names, those lists, and then providing what those options are in a very easy to understand way. If you would like to stay, here is your option. If you would like to go into the new lottery, these are the dates in your new option. So that is a part of the communication plan that won't be reactivated, but will just be really continued, but will be done with really the data to try to get at the heart of those numbers.
Okay, and a follow-up to that is the students who have been temporarily dislocated, what is their address, and how, I assume that accommodations will be made as those students move back into their homes and enter new zones, so to speak. Okay. I want to emphasize what Mrs. Jordan said. I think it's really important that we acknowledge that there will be there will be aggregates of economic, racial, cultural, linguistic groups in certain schools, and that it's critical that we recognize that those schools have needs, that the families understand, that the faculty understands, that the leadership understands, that the resources will be deployed specific to the needs represented by the schools. And then I have the same comment about before and after school. Thank you, Dr. Bernier, for bringing up your work with the collaboratory. That is awesome, because that is how going ahead we are going to deal with the pre-K problem. It's how we're going to have to deal with, it's how we will deal with the before and after school problem. So thank you for that work. I realize it probably won't come to fruition this year, but that is the only way we have going forward until we can figure out something of our own. And let's see, I want to say thank you for including thoughts about the high school schedule and putting it out here, just so we know it's on the table. Those are my comments. Thank you very much. I know this is a huge undertaking, yeah.
Before we move on, I just have a couple statements. First off, again, thank you for the presentation. It was excellent. This is going to be tough, but that's what we were elected to do. You know, if you're going to be a leader, you have to make tough decisions. You can't hold your finger up and say, which way should we go? And the system we have now is not sustainable. That was mentioned before. And if we do nothing, it will just be a total disaster. This is not something you can kick the can down the road. So again, thank you, and I look forward to getting this to its fruition. Any other comments, Ms. Jordan?
Thank you. So I'm just, sorry, I keep thinking. But so if a child has been in a school for 4 years, from first, and they're in their third grade year right now, from kindergarten on, and now we're going to reach out to their parents to say you have an option to drive yourself or get them in the, get them inside the other whatever group. So, because of the fact that you know that's going to be stress on the kid as well. And I'm thinking of the child as well now, because truthfully, my grandson will be in one of these things. Some of my grandkids, my nieces, nephews, all of them. So I'm looking at how they will look at knowing one school all of their lives, and now being, you know, you can't go unless we provide, or they are provided transportation, which, you know, of course, I know we would try to figure it out, whatever that looks like, but I'm just looking at that little person now and what that's going to do to them, and getting them ready, and not at the last minute go, nope, you can't go to that school now. So but again, I understand why we're doing this, but I have to.
Ms. Jordan, to
Coming
your,
out of my heart.
oh, sorry, Dr. Bernier.
No, it's a great point, but no matter what system of school assignment you have, those situations occur. I don't want to cloud the discussion with terminology that would then take somebody away from this presentation thinking that we're thinking anything else but a revisement of our current choice system. But no matter whether you were on one end of the continuum where you had free choice, where everything was transported and you made a transportation decision in order to move forward with a sustainable system, or whether you had a fully zoned school system opening a new school, children are always impacted. The reality of that is working with the principals, working with our staff, and continuing to communicate with parents that a change in a school is not the be-all and end-all. Because if you look at our survey data about our schools, generally, parents are very happy in general with the school that they attend. They don't want to attend the one next door because they don't know the one next door. And it's the fear. So I think you raise a very valid point. But we also have, I did appreciate the word bold. It is a bold recommendation. We've got to do something differently, or we'll be sitting here listening to parents talk about their children not being picked up and they're transporting them anyway. And thank you, Ms. Jordan, for raising the voice of my child is going to be impacted, because we all know at a work session we don't take public comment. In our next briefing, I suspect not only will parents be here, but their child will also be here. So to the chairman's point of this is a difficult decision, there will be an influx of people, because through our town halls, through our community dialogues, what we've heard is, this is great, this is great. When you pull them aside and say, but it may impact your grandson or your grandchild, it's not such a great thing anymore, all right? People understand conceptually the system has to devise a new way of bringing our students and locating them at a school building. The difficult part will be in the next several months as we move forward in helping our community to understand we are at a crossroads. We can go into next year doing exactly what we're doing, but that 2,000 plus that are late every day could be 4,000 to 6,000 students that are late every day. And for me, educationally, if we're doing what's in the best interest of a child, we have to get them to school on time and maximize the instructional day that we have.
Thank you. Board members, any other comments? Okay. Next on the agenda is the agenda review for the January 10th regular agenda. Dr. Bernier?
Mr. Chair, I only had a set of questions come in on one particular item. It was on the Human Resources J2 approval to reclassify one position as part of a reclassification for academic services. This particular position was reclassified to a program administrator position. It is a grant opportunity that we were provided, therefore saving operational dollars and making us more operationally efficient. There would be no plan for us currently to replace the coaching position. The person who's identified in the board resolution will be working with the DJJ programs and their educational components. That includes programs such as the Lee County Jail, Juvenile Detention Center, the Vince Smith Center, and the Fort Myers Academy program. This position actually resides in student services. Keep in mind that we are now moving our staff in these systems back to a 255-day calendar. So by moving our staff back to 255 days, we needed an additional administrator, again grant funded, who can be available during those what normally would be summertime off, because these programs do not stop at the end of what we would consider a traditional school year. Specifically, this would be the 4th program administrator position in the district. The others are all Title I or grant position. And the $39,970 is the additional amount for the cost for the reclassification. Reclassifications typically occur during a budget cycle. As we move forward into the budget planning process for this year, there will be additional reclassifications, and the board will be advised both in one-on-ones and in workshops and briefings as to those changes. Other than that, I had no other submitted questions related to any of the board items coming up on the agenda for the 10th.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Jordan.
Thank you. And the reason I brought this up and I asked these questions was because of the fact that when I was reading the definition of what this entails. It had nothing to, it did not state that it was grants and how long the grant was for or anything like that. That's why I questioned where this person was going, what they were doing, what was the other, that's why these questions came up.
I think there's another reason, and I've clarified this as well. When we reclassify a position, we should reclassify a position at no time, unless somebody is specifically being appointed to a position, should we be labeling an item with a person's name. It's not the way the board really should go about this process. If we change the job description of position X, we should just describe it as a change to position X, and then if the name comes up or the individual occupies it, when we get to the personnel agenda, it will show up there. But a straight reclassification should not include an individual's name, and I've asked the Human Resources Department to correct that moving forward, and that's on me. I didn't catch it in the draft form.
And then just one more.
Go ahead.
And then it became from a part-time position to a full-time position with benefits. It was not this individual or this position as a coach was a part-time with no benefits. And now it's, the reclassification made it a full-time position with benefits, correct? Because
I know the position moved to a full-time, and I believe that's the movement from 250, from a 196 to a 255-day position. That's what makes it full-time. For instance, most of our contracts end at the end of a school year, and then they're renewed for the following year. Because this staff at these locations is moving back to a 255-day full-time position, that's what happens. As to benefits and other things, I was not asked that question prior to the briefing. I'd have to get back with Human Resources to get a final answer to that.
thank you.
All right, any other? We'll move on to the good of the order. Mr. Fisher?
Thanks, chairpersons. Unlike my questions, I'll try to keep this brief. So right before the break, on one of my school visits, I went to Trafalgar Middle School, met with Principal Kane and her staff and had a great tour around there. And so thank you to Trafalgar Middle School. Also wanted to let all of you know, in my personal capacity, I went out to the inauguration of our governor, and I can tell you that it was very positive up there, especially in regards to education. So I'm looking forward to seeing the things that are going to come down the pike. Wanted to wish everyone a happy new year and a great year ahead. Thank you.
Mrs. Giovanelli, if you're still with us, do you have any good for the order?
I don't, thank you.
Okay. Ms. Jordan?
I do not have anything. I would just look forward to this coming year. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Langford Fleming?
Yes, Happy New Year. Looking forward to 23 being a successful year for our district. Before the break, I was able to go visit 2 classrooms at Heights Elementary, and they did an outstanding job. They are studying the entire electoral process, which I thought was so fun. I was able to speak with them, and teachers, Mrs. Licata and Ms. Sariski did a fine job at preparing the students, so I appreciate that and being able to have that opportunity.
Thank you. Ms. Jordan? I mean, I'm sorry, Ms. Morgan. They almost sound the same, they rhyme.
No, it's very close. No, I feel the same as everybody else. I'm really excited about the year. I think this meeting suggests that we're off to a great start. And so I wish everybody a great new year. And I have no further comments. Thank you.
Thank you. I have nothing for the good of the order right now. I'll save mine for the board meeting. So, meeting adjourned. Thank you.